Hello everyone, Ben DeBono here, ready to tackle the back half of question 3 on the simplicity of God. A couple quick notes before we get going. First, from here on out, I want to make very clear that when we spend a lot of time on a video explaining definitions like I did last time, I'm going to assume those definitions from this point out. So words like essence, substance, a couple of the other big ones that we talked about last time, there may be times where I kind of give a quick refresher, but for the most part, I'm going to assume those definitions because we don't have time to spend on them every time. So if you missed a video or forget something, refer to my Summa dictionary that's in the video description and everything. And go from there. If you're still lost, you can Google, you can contact me on the Reading the Summa Facebook page, in the YouTube comments, and we'll do whatever I can to help you get unlost, because I know some of these terms are complicated, but unfortunately we just can't take the time every time to go through them again. So just be aware of that. And then second, on some of these ones where things are really complicated, which this question certainly is, and the articles are that we saw last time are complex, the articles this time are going to be complex. I would encourage you, if you're feeling in over your head with any of this stuff, which there's no shame in. I think I certainly have at times reading the Summa felt that way. Many times. I think it's a very normal reaction, especially if you're new to this stuff. Focus on key terminology and big ideas, okay? Don't worry about getting every last nuance. Focus key terminology, big ideas. If you can get that, you'll be good to go, and you're not going to miss some absolutely vital piece of information. You get the big idea, you'll be able to grasp with the arguments that build upon simplicity of God, perfection of God as we go forth. Okay, so with all that out of the way, let's dive right into question 3, articles 5 through 8. Let's go. All right, we are here in the Prima Pars, as always, in the treatise on the one God, in the second part, how God exists, in the divine essence, and in question 3, the simplicity of God. Last time we looked at these 4 articles. Today we are going to look at articles 5 through 8. One additional definition. This word genus here, this can be a little bit confusing because genus can mean a couple different things. Scientifically, if you go to Wikipedia and look at the definition of genus, it simply means, well, I shouldn't say simply, but a simple definition of it would be a set of species, okay? A group of species, something like that. And Aquinas will use it in roughly that sense sometimes, but a lot of times he's also using it to refer to Aristotle's 10 categories, which I'm not going to go through. You can Google that if you want some more information on him. I just listed them off. The Wikipedia page on Aristotle's categories will give you a pretty good overview if you want to know more. But Aquinas kind of switches between using genus in more of that general sense and using it in a specific sense of Aristotle's 10 categories. And he doesn't really warn us when he does that, and we'll see that in these articles. Okay, so be aware of that definition. That's important. All right, and starting in Article 5, we run into it right away, whether God is contained in a genus. Now, in this case, he's asking whether God is contained in one of Aristotle's 10 categories. Okay, so our objections, a being that is self-subsisting would fall under the genus of substance, which is one of those 10 I just showed you. God is such a being. He is self-subsisting, therefore he belongs to the genus of substance. Things, which is the highest category, by the way. So the argument isn't, that God is in any of the lower categories, but he is at least in that highest category. Things can only be measured by something in their own genus. God is the measure of all substances, and therefore, in order to be so, he must be in the genus of substance. Argument from authority. Genuses come before what they contain. Nothing comes before God, as we've seen previously. He's the primary being. Therefore, God is not in any genus. Our arguments. A genus exists in potentiality. Okay? Species are the actualization of their genus's potency. So, to speak of genus in the more general sense, if we take the genus of animals, human beings are the actualization of one possible animal. Okay? Your dog is the actualization of one possible animal. Okay? Therefore, no being in a gene that is in a genus is in a genus unless it contains potentiality. You know, you are in the genus of animal. You, before your existence, the matter and form that composed you had the potential of being a dog and not a human. Since God is pure act, which we saw in proof 1, he cannot be contained in a genus. If God was in a genus, it would be in the genus of being, in other words, pure existence. But every genus must contain differences within it. Again, you know, genus is, okay, we have this category, and then there's a whole bunch of differentiated things within that category. The only difference being, meaning absolute being, could have is non-being, non-existence, which wouldn't be in a genus because it's not an actual thing, it's the lack of a thing. So that would be the lack of a genus. Therefore, God is not in a genus. For every being in a genus, existence and essence are different. It has been shown in the previous article this is not true of God, therefore he is not in a genus. Okay? Objections answered. Substance denotes a being that has a distinct essence and existence. This is not true of God, therefore he is not in the genus of substance. Objection 2, refers to things measured proportionately, but God is not a proportional measure for anything. He measures things only in the sense that all things derive their being from him. So, big picture, what we're saying here is that we can't fit God into any category with other beings. He transcends all categories of existence. Okay. Article 6. Whether in God there are any accidents. Remember, we talked about this earlier in Articles 1 and 2. Accidents meaning the things that give us individuality. Okay? Are the features that if you take them away, you would still be a human. So if you have blue eyes, you could not have blue eyes and you would still be a human being. Your blue eyes are an accident in you. Our objections. Something cannot be an accident in one being and a substance, forgot to spell that correctly there, in another. Things like wisdom and virtue are accidents in us. You can be human without being a wise human, as so many of us like to prove. Those things are also in God, therefore they must be accidents in him. So if wisdom is an accident in us, which it is, it can't be an accident in God. We say God is wise, therefore God has an accident, the accident of wisdom. Every genus requires a first principle. There are genera of accidents. If God is not their primal being, so if God is not the first principle of the genre of accidents, and here we're using genus or its plural, genera, genre, in the more general sense. If God is not their primal being, they must have many primal beings, which is logically impossible because you can't have more than one primal being. Argument from authority. Accidents only exist in subjects. Boethius tells us no simple being, which God is, as we've been proving all along here, can be a subject. God is a simple being, therefore he has no accidents. Let's flesh that out. Subjects are actualized by their accidents. Okay, so remember, any subject, any being within a genus exists in potency. Its accidents actualize it and bring it into both its species and its individuality. Okay, so therefore that which has accidents, because accidents actualize us. You can even hear, the roots are very similar in those two words, and that's not to make if you can excuse the pun, that is not an accident, that is not accidental. Therefore, that which has accidents has potentiality, which is not true of God since he is pure act, proof 1. Absolute beings can have nothing added to them. God is an absolute being, which precludes his having accidents. So accidents, another word you could say for them, are additions. So if you were to take raw human essence, and then you add something to it, which is the case of every human being, none of us are raw humanity, then what you are adding is accidents. Accidents imply addition. Addition is impossible with God. You can't add anything to him. The accidental is caused in the essential. So, the fact that you have accidents is caused in you. Something causes those accidents, whether we want to say it's God or, just genetics or whatever level we want to think about that on. It doesn't really matter. Something causes you to have blue eyes. Something takes the raw human essence that you are formed from, in the formal sense of the formal cause, and causes you to then have blue eyes accidentally. Okay? God can have nothing caused in him. We saw that proof too, because he is pure cause. He is the efficient cause. Therefore, he has no accidents. All right, so how about those objections? Wisdom and virtue are accidents in us, and we speak of those accidents being in God analogically. Remember, everything we say about God, when we say God is this, God is that, it's really not that different than when we say God sits on his throne in heaven. God doesn't literally sit on his throne. We are incapable of grasping whatever God literally does or is, so we speak of him analogically, whether that is in a very pure, clear metaphor, such as God sits on his throne, or when we say God is wise. We are speaking of the effects of God that we see in the world around us, in our own lives, in divine revelation. Those effects imply wisdom, so that we wind up saying analogically that God is wise in the way we are wise. But that's not the case, because we can't understand God. We're only speaking of his effects that we experience. And then reply to 2, substance is prior to accident. Therefore, all accidents are reducible to the genus of substance. And here we're kind of combining the general meaning of genus with Aristotle's 10 categories of which substance is the highest. God, as we already saw in the previous question, stands outside of every genus, including the genus of substance. Article 7, whether God is altogether simple. Now, these next two are going to be kind of a catch-all of everything that we've already said. Okay? So given everything we said, he has no body, he has no accidents, he is not matter and form, his essence and existence are the same, he is his essence. Given all that, is there anything left that would preclude the possibility of saying God is an altogether simple being? Well, our objections are going to say yes. Whatever is from God must imitate him. Nothing that comes from God is altogether simple. You and I are composite beings. Everything is a composite being. Even a single-celled molecule is a composite being in its own way. Therefore, he is not, because everything that comes from God, which is everything, as he is the primal being, must imitate him. Nothing that comes from God is altogether simple. Therefore, neither is he. 2, for us, the compound is better than the simple. The best must be attributed to God, therefore he is not altogether simple. Compound beings are better than non-compound beings. You as a complex human being are better than that single-celled molecule. You as a more complex being are a nobler being. We are nobler beings than dogs because we possess a higher sense of reason. Dogs are nobler beings than mosquitoes, and so on it goes. More complex beings are greater beings for us. Argument from authority. Augustine tells us in the De Trinitate, God is altogether simple. Straightforward enough. Argument. The absolute simplicity of God is demonstrated first in the previous articles. In other words, given everything we've just said, we've, using the via negativa, essentially ruled out any complexity in God. But we do get a little bit more in this argument. Next, every composite being is dependent on its parts. Okay? You, as a composite being of body and soul, are dependent on both to continue living. God is dependent on nothing. By definition, the ultimate absolute being itself, cannot be dependent upon anything. Composite beings have their different components united by cause. Again, this goes back to what we were just talking about with accidentals. Accidentals are caused in us. All of your composite parts, whether they are substance or accident, are caused in you, but we've already seen proof 2, God can have nothing caused in him. He is cause. He is the absolute cause. Therefore, he is not composite. Composite beings have potential and action. You have any composite being exists in a state of potentiality. It has the potential to become composite, to have things added to it. That's ruled out in proof 1. Therefore, God's not composite. In every composite thing, there exists something in it that is not itself. But in the form of that thing is nothing but itself. In other words, you as a human, you could chop off your foot, which is part of you, but it is not you. If you chop off your foot, you're still a human. Okay? But in the essence of humanity, if we could understand the form of humanity that exists in all of us, at least in this Aristotelian perspective, within that there is nothing but humanity. God is pure form. We saw that in Article 2. He's not matter in form, he is pure form. Therefore, he is not composite, because in every composite being, composite beings preclude the possibility of being pure form. You are your form and your matter. Okay, we saw that in Article 2. Objections answered. Things do imitate God, but it is in the essence of things for their existence to differ from their essence, as will be shown in part 1, question 4, Article 3. So we'll get back to that point later. But for now, we're just going to kind of accept it as a given that things do imitate God, but by their very nature as things, their existence must differ from their essence. And so they can be composite beings even if he is not, and even though they imitate him. And we'll get back to that. Reply to 2, the reason composite things are better for us is because perfection is not found in any simple thing. You are not perfect as, just your parts. You are drawn closer to perfection by your parts coming together in a composite being. This is not true of God, who is absolutely perfect in his simplicity. And then finally, Article 8, which comes at this from the other side, and also is a refutation of pantheism. Okay? And I won't get into that a ton, but be aware that that's a lot of what's going on here. Whether God enters into composition with other things, which the pantheist would say yes, because God isn't everything. 3 objections. God is the being of all things according to Dionysius. The being of all things must enter into composition with everything. God is a form. Form is part of a compound. So the form of humanity is part of the compound that is you and me. Therefore, God is part of a compound. God is identical with primary matter. Primary matter enters into composition with things because it is matter. Therefore, so must God. Now, Aquinas is going to dispute this a great deal, as we'll see. Argument from authority. Dionysius tells us nothing can commingle with God. And Aristotle, who you'll note, there's a number of characters in the Summa, who Aquinas refers to as their title. And the philosopher, I'll point them out as we go, but the philosopher is Aristotle. So the philosopher, Aristotle, tells us the first cause rules all without commingling with them. Argument. There are 3 errors that people commit on this point. Some people claim that God is the soul of the world, very pantheistic, or at least the soul of heaven. Some claim that God is the formal principle of all things. So in some ways, God is the form of all, and therefore God is everything, just as the form of humanity is all humans, to a certain extent, or at least partially all humans. Some claim that God is prime matter. So we're already going back to objection 3, and Aquinas is saying that's not right. And these are all untrue, since they claim God enters into composition with things, which is shown as untrue in several ways. First, prime matter cannot be identical with the first cause, meaning God, according to proof 2, because prime matter is potential and the first cause is actual. We have beat that dead horse quite a bit in the previous articles. To act belongs to God primarily as the first cause, but it does not belong to any part of a composition to act primarily for the composite acts. Does not belong to any part of a composition to act primarily for the composite, not the parts. Let me try and understand what I'm saying here, because I think I wrote that kind of funny. And I'll fix it before I send this video. It does not belong to any part of a composition to act primarily for the composite. Oh, I think I should have a comma here. I apologize for that. So what this is saying, let me read it again. It does not belong to any part of a composition to act primarily, for the composite acts, not the parts. In other words, when your hand picks up a baseball and throws it, you are picking up the baseball, not your hand. The composite, you as a whole, is acting, not just your part. Okay? And because it belongs to God to be primary action, if he was a composite, he wouldn't truly be doing the one acting, just in the same way that your hand isn't truly doing the action when you pick up a baseball. It is the whole that acts, not the parts, but that can't be true of God. God is the one who acts. He's not composite. No part of a compound can be absolutely primal, and God is absolutely primal. Then the objections answered. Reply to 1. The Godhead is called the being of all things as their cause, not as their essence. In other words, God is the being of all things in the sense that he causes all things to be, but not in the sense that he exists within all things, in the way the pantheist would say. The form which God is, absolute form, is not part of a compound. It differs from all other forms that way. And we saw that earlier. You can look at Article 2 for more detail on that one. And then simple things, God and prime matter, are not different in that they do not have accidents, but they are diverse as they are absolutely distinct. And we saw, so essentially, given that, what we say there about prime matter, that prime matter is something caused and God is not. We can't say that God and prime matter are different because, in a very technical sense, God and prime matter, or anything that is different, is caused to be different by an accidental inside of it. And God and prime matter both lack accidents, but they are diverse in the sense that, it's essentially using a different word because we've already applied the word different to mean that which is differentiated by accident. So again, don't get too hung up on that. Just understand that God and prime matter are distinct, and therefore the pantheist claim is refuted. Alright, that's it for question 3. Next time, we're actually going to tackle an entire question in one video. Question 4 on the perfection of God is made up of only 3 articles, so I'll be back with you in a couple of days, and we'll take on that topic. Until then, again, focus on big picture, key terminology. You get that, you're going to be in good shape going forward. So, that's all for now. I'll talk to you later. Goodbye.